I've ever had the honor of embarking on. It was myself and my parents who cared for my grandfather. He was a World War II veteran, and we cared for him for about a total of 12 years. But we were really, really lucky because for the last 4 years, he didn't want to leave the house, but he was still with us. And it was only really the last 6 weeks that he wasn't as with us as he could have been. So we were lucky. So I'm going to talk about communication. I am going to skip over the videos in this. Normally I teach without the videos, but I do want to leave lots of time for any questions and any answers I can give you, because I guarantee you, if you have the question, I've probably dealt with it. So I think let's just go ahead. And this is the first time I've done the PowerPoint on my own. If it goes a little bit crazy, forgive me with that. So today we're going to learn how to do effective communication with a person in lots of different stages of the disease. There's 3 different stages, and we're going to talk about effective ways all throughout. The important thing to remember is that communication is what sets us apart from other animals. It's how we can communicate what we think, how we feel, and what we need. It's also how others let us know what they think, need, and feel, right? Without communication, we're just guessing. It's blind. So I want you guys for a minute to imagine that you're wearing glasses, but instead of them being traditional glasses with one lens, I want you to think of them as having 20, 50, 100 lenses just stacked one on top of the other, right? Like when we used to go to the eye doctor before it was digital. And each of those lenses is comprised of different things. It's past traumas, it's how we're feeling, it's what unmet needs we have today, it's our culture, our ethnicity, any number of things, right? So we have all of these lenses in front of our eyes. We also have the same lenses in front of our ears, because here's the thing about communication. Less than 30% of communication is what I say. It honestly doesn't matter what words I say in a lot of situations. What communication is your brain interpreting not just the words, but my tone of voice, my body language, my facial expressions. But the key there is you're interpreting. So you're taking my tone of voice, my body language, my facial expressions with the words I say, and you're literally filtering through all these lenses, both from your eyes and from your ears. And so all these messages get in your brain, and then your brain interprets them into what it says you're saying. And so that's why there's so often there's miscommunication, right? Or something doesn't go quite right. So now I want you to think about somebody who has Alzheimer's or dementia. It's like they're wearing a helmet that's kind of foggy. It's not super clear, and it's got some cracks on top of all of these lenses. And that's what it's like for them to try to understand what you're saying to them. They might get it some days, they might not get every word. It's very different. But try imagining to respond to a conversation that you maybe only hear half of it or even a quarter of it. It's very, very difficult, and we need to remember to be patient. Patience is the key to everything. And so we're going to talk about all 3 stages and some different ways that we can, and techniques that I can give you to help you with this. So in the first stage, verbal communication starts to become a challenge. So a lot of people will start to struggle finding the right word. They'll need longer to respond, and they can become easily confused. And that's why a lot of times they withdraw from conversations. It's because they can't keep up. So imagine watching the world, not being able to fully understand what's happening and not having the ability to communicate that. In this stage, patience is key. I'm going to tell you, in every stage, patience is key. No matter what's waiting for you, no matter what the clock says, you've got to give the person as much time as they need to process the conversation and respond. In this stage too, the early stage, as difficult as this could be, this is a stage where you need to focus on empowering the person. This is the stage where you need to have the difficult conversations to set the boundaries and to understand how this person wants to be cared for, what plans they want made, and have them be in charge or assist or be a part of making these long-term care plans. This is also the stage where you want to start creating routines and implementing them to create familiarity and comfort. You can start to build some muscle memory to help you get through everything. So when you speak to the person, ask them questions directly. And what's very important is don't ever stop talking to the person. Never, never, never. Even if you feel like they're having an off day and they're not really understanding what you're saying, still tell them about your day, still communicate with them, because at the end of the day, we're human beings and we need to feel that sense of connection. And so just listening to your voice and knowing they're connected will kick in and help make them feel safe and part of the environment. So what you might want to do is, ask them questions directly, use their name as the first word as a signal for them to focus on you. Use short, clear sentences, be direct and straightforward. Don't use adjectives, don't use adverbs, just be very, very, here's what we need to say. Pause and give them time to process what you are saying. If you can, touch their arm to keep them focused on you, and never rush. Use a calm tone and keep your voice soft. Always include the person in all conversations which affect them, and never assume they can't participate. Working with my grandfather, this is where I learned the skill. And this is a leadership skill, it's a communication skill, but Grandpa taught it to me, of learning to take that deep breath. And as I breathe in, I just push all this stress and anxiety and everything that's bothering me or distracting me out of my system, understanding that for however long this conversation is going to happen, I am 110% focused on you, and this is your time, and to just slow down and to understand that everything else will work itself out in the long run. Grandpa taught me this lesson, and I've implemented this in every organization that I've run and with all of my teams. And let me tell you, it's one of the best lessons you can learn. Just always slow down, calm down. It's going to be okay. The most important thing is to remember to treat the person as an adult, to treat them like a child. Don't assume or speak over the person. Always speak directly to them and always communicate in the manner that is best for them. I think as we see, particularly my generation and my daughter's generation age, that the way they want communication given to them is going to vary. It's going to differ from how the current generation that's struggling with the disease wants it, the communication. But ask them and communicate the way that's best for them. As much as possible, laugh, be honest, and remain connected with that person. These moments can become some of the best moments that you share with the person. Meet them where they are. Give them the gift of understanding them and give them the time to process and communicate with them. It's the greatest gift that you can give to anybody. During this last stage, we took Grandpa to the circus, and I didn't understand that I was supposed to buy tickets that were specific for a wheelchair. It just wasn't clear. I missed it, or I was just very excited that Grandpa was going to the circus with me. That detail doesn't matter. So when we got there, we ended up and got separated. And so my mom, dad, and daughter went and sat in our seats, and Grandpa and I sat in the section for wheelchairs. And it was probably one of the best things that ever could have happened to me. I don't even know that I watched the circus, but I watched Grandpa, and I got to see the wonder and amazement that went over his face. I got to hear him giggle, the way he would squeeze my arm when he got excited, the way he loved the dancing dogs. He couldn't always communicate what he was feeling, but his emotions were on his face, and we included him in everything. As the disease progresses, your loved one is going to struggle more and more to find the right words. But you know what? I have days I struggle to find the right words. And so I always try to remember that whenever I'm dealing with anybody who's struggling. We all struggle. And so it's going to become obvious that they're going to feel lost and struggle to communicate. And they may even use the same words over and over, or repeat themselves, lose their train of thought, or need to communicate more through behavior than words. Here's what you have to do. You can't allow their repetition to annoy you. If they tell you the same thing 15 times in a row, you know what? Become like a duck and let that water just roll off your back, and just understand they can't help it. So it's just what's going to happen. Don't be short-tempered. Don't rush conversations. You've really got to focus on creating that safe place that they need so that they can communicate with you. If they begin to feel fear or afraid, it's vital for you to comfort them and work to ensure their routine is uninterrupted as possible. It was during this stage that we started having dinner every Saturday night with Grandpa, just to have that family time and make every minute count. And we noticed that for him, mobility was really becoming a struggle. And so rather than making Grandpa struggle to get to the dining room table and stress about it and then worry about getting back and not enjoying the meal, my mom changed it, and we moved our weekly family dinner to the living room, and we all sat around Grandpa in his chair, because you know what? It was easier for us to change than for Grandpa to change, and we wanted him included in everything. And he may not have said much, but he always appreciated it. Mom and I really focused on maintaining the routines that we had established with him to keep the normal stuff, so he knew what to expect. And we learned that that helped a lot. And we were also able to anticipate his needs and keep him comfortable. And because of that, he felt safe. And we were able to keep him home until he passed, which I think was a huge gift for us. Um, Remember that you've got to control the environment, right? You have to make it safe and comfortable for that person. Use a quiet, calm tone when speaking to them. As much as possible, approach the person from the front. Try not to startle them. Create routines from communication. If you notice, I keep saying create routines, be patient, don't rush. That's the secret to this, right? And it's hard to do. I really struggle to not rush my husband, who has some TBI, some brain injuries from when he was over in Iraq twice. And I have to remember to slow down, and on his bad days to give him a minute. Begin always every conversation by saying their name. I used to say Grandpa's name and touch his arm or hold his hand. And I always got down at eye level from Grandpa, right? Because I always wanted to respect him. He was a person. So I didn't want to seem like this big, scary person leaning down, or that I was condescending, or however that could have been interpreted. So I always got at eye level with him. Don't argue, criticize, or correct. Honestly, at this stage of the game, it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong. What matters is that you're connecting and encouraging that conversation and communication. Remember that they're struggling to communicate with you, and that we can't always name how we feel, right? We have struggles too. And so relate to that and give them the benefit of the doubt. If you see that they're really struggling, be empathetic. Tell them how you struggled in something that day and have a laugh with them. Remember too that we're going to need to take hints and read their body language to understand what they're saying. I always found it helpful to remember that on bad days, I struggle. I have pretty severe asthma, so sometimes talking is just hard, right? And my short-term memory struggles with it. So I always remembered that with Grandpa, and I would just apply that to him and think, if I'm struggling today, Grandpa might be too. And sometimes we would just share a good laugh about how we both forgot a word or how we both needed a minute, and it helped us. Mom and I have this habit of walking very quickly. We move very quickly, and I'm animated, you can tell. And so we soon learned how this could startle Grandpa. And so we never expected Grandpa to adapt to us as he progressed through this disease. We always adapted to him. And so by watching him, we understood what he needed. And so we just changed the house rules. My daughter was, oh my goodness, give me a second. She was 11 when he passed. So from the time that she was 5 until she was 11, this was her world. And so we just changed the rules with my daughter, right? She couldn't run through Grandpa's house. She couldn't be loud. She could play, but she had to respect Grandpa. And you guys are probably thinking, oh, that hampered her childhood or any number of things, but it didn't. It forced them to create a bond, and she would play with her toys with Grandpa, and they would have coffee together. And it was amazing because we were able to meet his needs. He stayed present with us. So remember that it's very possible, starting in the middle stage, that this person could start to live in a different reality. Join them. A great tool in this stage. Keep your answers brief. Look at the emotions behind the statements and respond to those. And when you can, stop and enjoy the moment. Live in the memory and share a laugh. Connecting with the person will create a bond which supersedes the disease and will always allow you to connect with them no matter the stage. Remember to these are precious moments and your time is finite. So learn to really just stop and smell the roses, right? So if they're back like Grandpa would go back to the war all the time. I went back to the war with him. He and I never had a problem communicating, and Grandpa would always do what I asked him to do because I just met him there. So during this time, we watched a lot of old Westerns and REI television because that's what made Grandpa comfortable. That's what he liked. And it reminded him of his happier days. And it was really interesting. One day this old movie came on, and I don't remember which movie it was. I wish I could remember. And all of a sudden he just started talking, oh, this is the movie that Grandma and I went to on our first date. And we learned this whole story that we wouldn't have known any other time because we were just there with him. It was also during this stage that my daughter, when she was in first grade, entered the science fair, and she actually partnered up with my grandfather, and they did this entire science experiment on how wingspan and different shapes of paper airplanes affected how far they would fly. Grandpa prepared for this project for like a week. He watched all these shows on airplanes and he was ready to go. And I'm really excited to tell you guys, we worked all Saturday on this and they won first prize. And I wish that you guys could have seen the look on Grandpa's face when we brought home that blue ribbon, because Grandpa actually had to drop out in the 6th grade because of the depression and everything. And so for him to place first prize in the science fair with my daughter was huge. I can't even begin to share the feelings we all had that day. I can't find the words for them. I hope you guys can join me with, kind of feeling it. But so Grandpa and I had a routine, right? I would always say his name, I would touch his arm, hold his hand, and I would look into his eyes. And then when I knew he was listening, we would talk. I always would remind him that he had as much time as he needed and that his thoughts and opinions were important. I would force him to give us answers, not in a mean way. Please don't think that. But I would tell him, Grandpa, what you have to say is important. We want to hear it. We can wait for you. And so he would participate and he would tell us what he wanted for dinner or if he was ready for a nap. And it worked really great. And no matter how far along he progressed, he would smile at me and I know he heard me. And so sometimes instead of asking him open-ended questions, right, depending on how the day was going, I would give him choices. And I never gave him more than 2 choices. And I would use my hands to help him. So I'd be like, this is choice 1, this is choice 2. So if he couldn't say the word, he could point to my hand and I knew what he was choosing. We would also too communicate through winking sometimes. Grandpa and I just found what worked for us and we moved forward. But it's the same as when you work with kids, right? You find what works and you keep going forward. I used a lot of classroom management techniques and methods too with him, but I always did everything out of respect because I was determined to find the best communication manner for us. And that was what my priority was. And so that's what I focused on. Remember that in this stage, your loved one's easily startled. And so make sure that your house is free of things which could startle them. Implement household rules. Make everybody else change and adapt to this person because trust me, no matter what their age, it's going to be easier for everybody else to adapt than this person. And remember that all of these changes that you're making is an investment in creating a loving environment for this loved one that you're taking care of. But also remember that when you do this, you're teaching your younger generations or your peers how to take care of somebody with love, how to put a priority over somebody's needs. So you're making long-term and short-term investments that are going to just blossom and bloom. And you might not see all the positive results from it, but trust me, they're there. Take conversations at the pace the person needs. Don't pepper them with questions or quiz them. And more than anything, remember that your time is finite. You need to turn negatives into positives. And most importantly, don't wear your heart on your sleeve. Remember their struggle and let things go. If your loved one hurts your feelings, don't take it personally. Remember, they can't always help what they say or how they act. As parents, we learn not to let our babies and toddlers hurt our feelings, right? And we learn to not let our teenagers upset us. We learn to look past the outbursts to see what's really bothering them. It's those same skills that we have to use here. So when my daughter, who's almost 17, has an outburst at me, rather than me yell at her, I wait a few minutes and then I'm like, hey, B, what's going on? Can we talk? And we work on what's the problem behind the outburst and we can move through things a little bit faster. The same thing we did with Grandpa, right? So in the last stage, communication can be reduced to a few words, sounds, or gestures. As their ability to translate their thoughts and needs into words dwindles, it's paramount for us as caregivers to learn to read body cues, facial expressions, and emotions. For example, anger could mean they're in discomfort. No matter how challenging this may become, you need to continue to speak to the person. Your priority is to treat them as an adult, speak to them, interact with them, and continue to care for them, right? This is why too, routines are so paramount. If you really have those routines built in, then if they can't always communicate to you what they need, you can look at the time and be like, oh, it's 1:59. Usually around this time on their routine, they eat a snack and then take a nap. You know what? It's only a few minutes early. I bet they're hungry or maybe they need to go to the bathroom. So it'll just help you connect with that person. We also really focused on giving Grandpa a lot of massages and manicures and pedicures. In this last stage, people will really respond to touch. We also did the pedicures for another reason. Grandpa had high blood pressure and diabetes, and by giving him these weekly pedicures, we could check his feet for sores and really kind of monitor how his diabetes was going. And so it served dual purposes. Plus, we would laugh a lot with him, and that was good. The more laughs you can share, the better. So in this stage, as we said, you've got to reach this person by engaging one of their five senses. Play their favorite music, give them massages, manicures, and pedicures. Bring pets around. Hold the person's hand when you speak to them. Remember to speak slowly and in a quiet tone, and ensure there are no sudden movements or loud noises to upset or startle your loved one. I'm sure you guys can tell I really have to focus on speaking slowly and in a quiet tone and not moving too much. My grandfather, when I was 2, I'm from Southern California, and so when I was 2, Grandpa and my mom and I went to Phoenix, which is a 6-hour drive, to visit my great grandmother, my grandfather's mom, and they were worried how they were going to make it through that long stretch in Death Valley with me. Well, apparently I talked the whole trip, and Grandpa just, he was just such a patient, kind man, and so good natured. Just listened to me for 6 hours. So I'm sure that in his mind, he wasn't surprised I talked a lot to him, even to the end. When the weather permits, take them outside. I would take Grandpa for walks, slow down and enjoy the little moments, create memories, find creative ways to connect with the patient. My daughter would meet my grandfather every day after school. And while she told him about her day, she would help him drink a cup of coffee and eat a snack. When she was learning to read and she would need to read for 20, 30 minutes every night, I would sit her down with Grandpa and I'd be like, hey, Grandpa, can you do me a favor? While I make dinner, can you listen to B read to you? It was fabulous. She got to practice her reading. Grandpa got read too. So let me catch up with my notes. So at this stage, Grandpa never forgot me. We always connected. And I met him in whatever reality he was living in. On days when it was my turn to sit with Grandpa, he would always tell me to sit and rest. I was going to grad school full-time, working full-time, had a little one, right? And so we made a deal. I would push the couch next to Grandpa's armchair and lay down, and he would put his hand on my head. And as long as his hand was there, I could doze. And if he lifted his hand, I woke up and I knew he needed me, or he would tap me. Other times I would play games with him. Grandpa didn't like the constraints of a diabetic-friendly diet. And so I would get him treats that were diabetic friendly, but I would put them in different wrappers, and I would let Grandpa think that he was eating things he shouldn't eat. And so I would tell him that, hey, you can have whatever you want for dinner as long as you don't tell my parents, or, hey, if you eat dinner, I'll give you some cookies. And he would giggle. It was his favorite game. But he always ate a good meal, right? And we always connected and shared a good laugh, and we didn't fight over having to eat or any of those other things. Create connections through nature, sound, favorite movies. During this time period, I also ran a summer day camp. And so I would call my mom every afternoon to tell her stories from the summer camp. And oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe some of the stories I could tell. I mean, they were just so outlandish. So Mom would tell them to Grandpa every day, and he would laugh and smile, but he knew what was going on. Remember, in this last stage, eating becomes a challenge, which is why, I had my food game that I played with Grandpa. So rather than worrying or stressing about eating, find a game that you can play. Find a way to entice them. Focus on creating food that's bright and pretty. Make food that smells good. Cook their favorite meal. Focus on engaging their senses, and their body will react and encourage them to eat. I mean, absolutely no disrespect for whatsoever when I say this, but if their favorite meal is ham steak and mac and cheese, and they want that every night, and if you make that every night for dinner, they're going to make a happy plate, they're not going to remember they ate it the night before, right? Our priority is keeping them healthy and happy in this moment. So on days when Grandpa didn't want to eat, I pulled out the cookies, right? They're called therapeutic lies. I always say I'm never above bribery. I would make sure Grandpa was well taken care of. Mom would make him French toast almost every night those last weeks because that was his favorite meal, and he would eat it. Our biggest obstacle with food was my parents' dog. She's a rescue dog. She weighs about, I think 10 pounds now, 8 pounds when Grandpa was alive. And she was very patient with him. She never bit him. And she was small enough she could sit on Grandpa without hurting him. And she was so good because Grandpa would go to pet her and he would accidentally, hit her head or pull her hair. And she just, when she had enough, got down, But the issue was she would sit next to him and she would convince him that he needed to share her food with him. And so if we didn't pay attention, Nim would get all of grandpa's dinner instead of grandpa. And that always provided a laugh. So remember that communication of any sort is all about interpretation, right? We communicate more through our body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice than the words that we say. Think about it for those of us who have kids, when we would ask our kids to do something they didn't want to do, and they would whine and drag their feet and drag out yes ma'am to 5 syllables, and we would get so mad at their sass, but in all reality, they're still doing what we asked them to, right? So just remember that this person is struggling too, and that we need to have positive body language and positive communication, and we've got to, remain calm and focused and meet this person where they are. And we've got to check our feelings at the door. We just can't bring our feelings in or be emotional. We have to be very logical and pragmatic so that we can really take care of this person, but then share a laugh too. Always let the person speak. Ask clarifying questions if needed, use short sentences, and always give the person time to respond. If they need to use visual cues, use them, right? And you know that person better than anyone. So have confidence when you're decoding messages. We were all confident with our babies. We can be confident as caregivers, right? So, that's where I'm going to stop share and bring you guys back up where I can see you and ask,